Welcome back to Reimagine. I'm Yonah Hochhauser, and today I'm glad to be joined by Nicholas Fett, CTO of Tellor. Nicholas, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, no problem. You are my first interview for this year, so I'm very excited. Hopefully this year it goes better than last year overall, although I did have some fun interviews. So Nicholas, for our viewers out there who might not be familiar with who you are, you want to give a little background, kind of who you are and how you got into blockchain?
Sure. So my name is Nicholas Fett, as he said. I'm the CTO of Tellor. So Tellor is a decentralized oracle on Ethereum. What that means really fast is if you have a smart contract, say you're a DEX, you're a derivatives contract, and you need off-chain data, we're the way that you get it in a decentralized way. A little bit of background on myself. So I got into blockchain and crypto pretty early. I was kind of going with the libertarian crowd in like 2011, 2010. I was part of the Ron Paul 2012 campaign, and then it sort of led me into people who knew about Bitcoin and trying to overthrow the Federal Reserve back then. Anyway, it was a long journey for me, and then I started working later at the CFTC, so it was the regulator of cryptocurrencies and derivatives, which led me in 2017. I left that position to start a derivatives platform on Ethereum. So I was an Ethereum Foundation grantee back in beginning of 2018, right when they kicked off the program. And then right whenever we were doing derivatives, it sort of leads you into the problem of, well, how do you get off-chain data? And there weren't, especially in 2018, there were no real off-chain oracles. So we came up with our own solution, and we liked it so much that we decided not to be a derivatives exchange, and we became an oracle provider. That's kind of a long story about how it is. We've been live since August 2019, and we're continuing to just make the system better and start putting data on chain.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think that's really interesting. You mentioned you kind of came in from that libertarian world, and a lot of people who got into the space, especially early, did come on because ideological ideals. Libertarian. Either the current financial system is broken. Let's detach. The government has too much control over the money supply. Let's take the power out of their hands. And I think that describes a lot of the people who came in early into crypto. And now that we're starting to see crypto really become mainstream, I mean, you could look back to 2017, 2018 and say that was kind of beginning, but I think most people would agree right now is, it's having this big boom. Retail people are getting in, institutions are coming in. Now that the space is becoming a little more mainstream, people from the traditional financial world are getting increasingly more involved in this space. How do you come to terms with that your libertarian side, that ideology that came in, fuck this system, we're doing something different. Does the fact that the mainstream's coming in now, dampen the joy? Does it change crypto in your eyes at all?
I think it definitely does. It's hard for it not to. I think just, the whole purpose of kind of crypto, at least in the beginning, is like a peer-to-peer cash system. We were trying to get away from the banks and trying to get away from the government. And if you read that was sort of the vision early on. And it's not that it necessarily has to stay with the vision, if other people can find a use for it, that's good. The more you start seeing these larger institutions come in, the more it ruins almost your narrative. If the narrative is censorship resistance, if the narrative of blockchain is this digital gold that nobody can tamper with or steal, it's really hard to say that that's the case if 90% of the coins out there are going to be owned by the same 12 banks that own the rest of the world. So it's really hard because a lot of times you see, the narrative that's kind of currently going around in like CNBC and the Fortune 500 companies that are jumping into Bitcoin is it's not this asset that's used to overthrow governments. It's just this digital gold that, it's sort of uncorrelated with other assets. So if you put part of your portfolio in there, it can be a hedge against the dollar. And that's all they say, but it sort of misses the whole point of like why it is a digital gold or why it sort of should hold any of these values, which is ultimately the censorship resistance piece, or why it should be decoupled from the dollar, we're going to have some really hard decisions to make kind of moving forward. So yeah, no, it definitely dampers it. But I think, I go into my conspiracy theory, like the long game, the long play we can do. So I think we just slowly give them all Bitcoin. We get them all in, and then we just fork them all out at the end.
I like that.
So we just delete all of their balances and say, screw you guys. We never wanted you in here anyway.
I like that. That's a bold move, and I would love to see if we could pull it off. And but like is there a situation where kind of we can have our cake and eat it too? Like you mentioned, to start off as peer-to-peer cashless system, but like in order for that to actually be useful and be a reality, it would have to be accepted at vendors around the world and have to really get adoption. But then once you get the adoption, then the mainstream and the banks are going to come in, and so like. Was the dream ever possible, and is it still possible to kind of it truly be decoupled from the traditional financial world while still being usable and relevant enough to actually make a difference?
I mean, I don't think so. Just in all honesty, like the technology isn't quite there. You're seeing scaling issues with Ethereum, with Bitcoin. You just can't scale to be one currency used for everything, and that's fine. But you don't need to get the mainstream. Like if 100% of the people all agree to use Bitcoin, and because we all want freedom with our money, we wouldn't actually need Bitcoin. We would just vote to have that better system in place. Like you could just build a centralized database at the Fed, and we could all trust them, and it would be nice and fast. Like the whole reason that you have Bitcoin is because it is this sort of minority, and it should always be this minority money. You should never have it be this powerhouse, and that's okay. I think what it does is it actually keeps people in check. So it keeps regulators in check, it keeps governments in check, because it always is sort of an option. Like I go back sometimes to thinking about like Napster, or with pirating music. You don't need everyone to pirate music to keep music prices down. You just need the option to go and pirate music. Because then if a company came and was like, hey, say Spotify monopolized the market and was like, okay, we're going to charge, thousands of dollars a month to listen to music, well, then we're going to go pirate music. So they can't do that. It's sort of just having these freedom preserving options available that sort of keep the governments and these monopolies in check. And I think that's what you're going to see with Bitcoin and with some of these other assets, that, one as soon as, say, some third world country starts printing their money, all the people will easily switch off and go to a digital currency, and that's great, and that's what it should be used for. But then once the government gets its shit back together, then they can go back to building their own thing, because there are benefits to your government having a currency. There are benefits to your local organization having a money supply or something like that. You don't necessarily need just one global money supply. That should never be the goal.
Well, I mean, right now, this is obviously, very current that we're speaking now. Bitcoin, hit above 40K, I believe, and now it's back to 33,000. I mean, obviously, if I haven't checked in the past 5 minutes, it could be up or down 10K either way. So kind of useless discussion there. But there was this big push. I mean, we demolished all-time highs both in Bitcoin, Ethereum approaching. Altcoins have also been doing pretty solid. What do you think was this big push, that caused this massive skyrocket? I mean, we heard a lot of news. This kind of seemingly coincided with PayPal announcing Bitcoin exposure, not really ownership, but really exposure to the asset of Bitcoin. A bunch of other public companies who started saying they put reserves in, MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor. What do you think was really if it was one thing or a couple of things, was the kind of this tipping point that really caused this, big Bitcoin boom and crypto boom across the board that we're seeing right now?
I mean, it's hard. Like you can just look at the top 10 cryptocurrencies, and maybe Bitcoin and Ethereum are good, and the rest are sort of scams at useless technologies at best. And it's not like this is the cream of the crop. We're finally developing the technology necessary to take this mainstream. No, these are the same guys that were here before 2017, and it's just people are throwing money at these risk assets. I think it's a large part to do with there's just a whole lot of money floating around in the world right now, and it needs a place to go that gives it some sort of good yield. Bitcoin is sort of an easy target, and now it's sort of become this popular meme for anti-government digital gold type pieces. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's really a shock that this is happening. Similar, like I said the same thing in 2017. Like, of course, alts weren't. Dentacoin shouldn't have been worth $100 million ever, and it's like all of these things. But hopefully, what it is doing is it's funding the next wave of innovation. Hopefully, it's funding the next wave of research. It led to a lot of really, like, I was a grantee that was able to quit my job and go full time into this because of that. And if we can fund kind of the next researchers, the next people who are going to build the actual thing that gets used, then it's a good thing. So you just sort of have to take it slow and be smart with it. But yeah, to think that sort of any of these are, like, we sort of know that Ethereum right now doesn't scale to fit the usage. But
well, let's talk about that. I mean, it's kind of been a victim of its own success. Kind of, the fact that it has been so useful, so successful, with so much assets and value locked on it, that obviously ETH 1.0 hasn't been able to scale. And they had it in the roadmap ETH 2.0, with sharding already for a long time. But because they were so successful, because there was so much assets that locked on ETH 1.0, they didn't want to break anything. They weren't in a rush to rush to ETH 2.0 because, hey, they don't want to mess anything up. So I wonder, if ETH 1.0 wasn't such a success, if there wasn't really that much value on it, we could have seen ETH 2.0 already a year ago or even longer. So facing this reality, let's look at the facts. Ethereum, that's essentially where all of DeFi and majority of smart contracts are written upon. That's where the users are. That's where the developers are. That's where the money is and the value. So how do you see it playing out? Do you see it, they're just going to maintain their lead until 2.0 launches? Will Ethereum be the mainnet, and then some side of side chain or layer 2 solution will come and they'll live, in harmony? Or will there just be competing layer 1 chains that are, interoperable with Ethereum, and will all be one big happy family?
yeah, I think there's like a few answers. Because it's really hard to figure out what world we're living in first. Like we launched our product in 2019, and I remember like hard coding in whenever we built our software for, like, so we have this mining software. It goes and fetches data from like Coinbase APIs and it puts it on chain and it submits it. And we hard coded in there, like, if the gas price is ever above 100, like something is astronomically wrong, just shut the system down. And then this was in 2019 because it was like it had gone there like for crypto kitties before that, and that was
Crypto
it.
kitties was the big one. Yeah.
And now that's just like the normal. Like if it's under 100, it's like cheap. You better get in there.
I'm assuming you changed that code.
Yeah, like of course, and but like, and that was back whenever prices were really low, too. Now, like we're at like 200 GWay gas prices, and the price of Ethereum is over $1,000. It's absurd to do any sort of transactions. Like our system, so like as the Tellor Oracle, like we need people on chain who are building smart contracts that want to read data. Those are our customers, and that's who uses us. Whenever it costs you $500 to deploy a contract, it really, really limits who can sort of do these things. And yeah, so it's one of those questions. I think the ultimate solution, we're seeing a lot more demand, so we're starting to work with people who are building on rollups and L2s. So we launched some support from the Matic network a month ago, and I think L2s are going to be the first thing, just because they're sort of interoperable with Ethereum. Like right now, nobody wants to lead the way off of Ethereum. So you're just building these kind of roll-up structures and things like that. And I think that's what we're going to see for the most part. I don't really see L1s or other competing L1s, because it's one of those things that the risk reward just isn't there. So, like if you're a gigantic app that's building something great, it's like you can build your own ZK rollup and just launch a token that manages, say, state on it, or has some backup thing. Now you have this immensely valuable token if you have any sort of success, and it skyrockets. Or you can go build on an L1 and give them all of the benefit to their token, and you just have to live off of fees. So it's, there's always been this broken mechanism in place whenever it comes to like layer ones, because the apps and the developers and the network that builds on top of it should be the people that sort of get the most value out of the platform. But what happens is it's actually just the devs and the holders of the L1 token that get most of the value, and I think they just aren't sort of compensating the developers enough to make that switch.
Well, so as someone who is developing, you are CTO at Tellor, and you guys are kind of developing this on Ethereum. What is how is like the, your mindset? Because like you said, when you guys were originally, developing a lot of this, gas prices were low and fees were low and the price was low. And then obviously because of this, the shift right now, the reality of the market is totally different, both in terms of gas fees, where it pretty much makes it non-economically feasible to do a lot of the functions that you guys, programmed for. So, are you guys have the mindset that, oh, things are going to even out, we'll figure out a solution to the fees and we'll just ride it out? Or do you have to really undertake this whole, fundamental shift of your economics of your project and of your oracles, to reflect this new reality?
Yeah, you definitely have to change. This was like, we've already implemented some changes, and we're launching new products that can enable us to sort of push less things onto Ethereum. You definitely have to change. We sort of, one of the things that led us into building the Tellor Oracle like we did, some of the other Oracle structures and the designs were, they were trying to just be able to query any API off chain, and then it would go and fetch it and bring it back onto Ethereum. And it was supposed to be this super low cost structure, this, low security, just really fast. Anybody can do it, really. But we saw like, no, if gas prices go up at all, it sort of makes this, if it costs you $2 to make an API call, like nobody's going to do it. Like what you want is several data points, say like an ETH US dollar feed on chain, really secure. And that's what we started to build, because you don't need really, really fast whole lot of data points. You need things that are sort of high value and very secure, because that's when gas prices go up, that's what's going to sit on Ethereum. And I think now what we're seeing is even that stage is we're moving beyond that. So what's Ethereum going to look like? It's probably just going to be this kind of checkpoint place for ZK rollups and other dexes. So you're just going to basically checkpoint the state in there, and the ultimate security is going to be provided by Ethereum, and then all of the other little apps and things are going to be run off chain, and then you're going to use some sort of Oracle bridge connected to. That's probably how I see it playing out. And yeah, that's what we're trying to build too. We've talked with like every other layer one out there. We've talked with probably all the layer twos as well, just trying to figure out what they have to offer. And the biggest thing is, it's just, if you don't have connection to Ethereum now, you're just not gonna, you can't do anything. Because people want, right now, what are these apps used for on Ethereum? It's trading and DeFi or gambling. It's these, you're betting on things on top of Ethereum, and you're trying to get this small yield for allowing other people to gamble on it. So if you want to do that, the best way to do it is you have to have access to all of these native tokens, which are on Ethereum at the moment. So,
well, you mentioned DeFi is gambling, so clearly you have interesting thoughts on DeFi. I'd love to dive in here. Do you have a negative connotation of DeFi? When you hear DeFi, is it in your mind? Does it, because I mean, you said gambling as the one word description. In your mind, is DeFi just a place for impossible returns and high risk, poorly written smart contracts, or is there something real there to be built?
A lot of it is. I mean, whenever usually you get a little bit of innovation and then a whole lot of copycats that aren't really adding anything new, and you're just sort of gaming it. You see it a lot, I guess, in the DeFi space, where somebody comes up with some new novel idea of printing money or rebasing your token or something like that, and then there's 5,000 copycats that don't add anything new to the space, and basically all you're doing is it's a knowledge game of who can get in first and who can sort of extract the most money from people getting in semi-late. And that's no good. You want people to actually build systems, but if that's kind of the price that we pay to get those other little innovations in terms of finance, then I guess it is. But that is kind of what people want. If you look at what people are spending gas on Ethereum, it's basically like Uniswap and 1inch, and then after that it's synthetics, DYDX, like if Compound, all of those are that's like the DeFi gas makers, and that's like it's a huge chunk of all the transactions going through on Ethereum. So they're crowding everything out, and it is what it is.
Yeah, but also with the growth of DeFi, the explosion of DeFi, that's also what's really given life to the need of oracles. I mean, it's really highlighted. That's kind of where the spotlight of this problem and the solution of oracles has really come to the forefront because of this explosion of DeFi. And right now, definitely the most valuable, if you're looking at just market cap, of the oracles is Chainlink. But even in terms of kind of mind space, if you were to poll the average person, I think that Chainlink probably is the biggest name recognition when it comes to Oracle. So what's separating Tellor? What differentiates Tellor from an Oracle like Chainlink?
Yeah, I mean, Chainlink's the biggest. Just it's thinking name recognition terms. It's one of the top 10 coins, I believe. So it's just got huge name recognition in terms of investing in coins. The biggest difference is just kind of the philosophy of what we built. Chainlink right now, the way it works is it's sort of they have a centralized provider, the Chainlink team, and it whitelists several people, and they get to the whitelisted nodes, then get to push price on chain. It's one of these things. It works, but it doesn't really fit our bill of censorship resistance or what we're trying to build. It's just sort of a tool for building apps, and I think ultimately that works great for the early DeFi apps and things like that. But then once we start moving into things that actually want to live up to the promise of, hey, we're building a censorship resistant derivatives exchange, say if the CFTC comes after you or something like that, you're probably not going to want to be using Chainlink or one of these places. So yeah,
you guys are a more decentralized Oracle network, as in however decentralized those other Oracle networks are claiming, you guys are even more decentralized.
I mean, that's really what we were trying to build. We were like, Chainlink was around kind of whenever we were building our derivatives platform in 2018, and you looked at it and you're like, all right, you guys could just censor anything. Like, why? Like, what's the point here? And so we set off to build our own, and that's what kind of led us down this path. Was that they really didn't live up to what they were claiming to be, and that's what we're sort of hoping that we can fix and get people on board. I think some of the with oracles in general, what we like to talk about are just some of the limitations. Whenever you go on a layer one, like you've been around the space, if a layer one claims to be fully decentralized and completely instant in terms of transaction speed, what do you know? It's probably lying, right?
Yeah, bullshit. That's bullshit.
Yeah, like you just know that because you've been around the space long enough. And then the same sort of goes with oracles. Like you're pulling off-chain data and you need to do it in a secure way. If somebody says like we can do it in a completely decentralized and a completely instant secure way, you're like, yeah, no, you can't. Like, it's just laws of computer science. So that's like Chainlink in a nutshell. They're really fast. They're really I guess secure because they have like high ridiculous market cap behind it. But there's obviously the trade-off is decentralization, like the scalability trilemma holds for oracles too. And that's kind of where we're
and that's kind of tied into the whole problem of the whole problem that oracles came to be is the same thing that's holding oracles back, is this idea that no matter how decentralized and how trustless a blockchain is, it needs the data that's coming in needs to hold those same characteristics. As in, it doesn't matter how decentralized a blockchain is. If there's a centralized data feed, it totally centralizes the blockchain. The same thing with the oracles. If the blockchain is just as decentralized and just as trustless as an oracle is, because that's really the data feed into it. And so that's a big issue. And so, you're on the inside. Is this, like you said, is this just a mathematical problem? Is this a kind of computer power on the network problem? If there's enough, hash power thrown at this, not hash power, but computer CPU power thrown at this, is that a fix? I mean, what is this big limitation that doesn't allow for fully decentralized as well as high speeds for Oracle?
Well, I think it's just so like what is an oracle? So you're trying to get off-chain data. So like if you, not even an oracle, if you think about what a blockchain is, you have a group of people who are trying to decide upon what some data is. So namely, like what transactions should be included in this block. And you have this whole network and complicated system set up to decide nothing but what transactions should be included in the block. And we can't decide that quickly. Like we you can't sort of settle that. But now with an oracle, right? With an oracle, we don't just want specific information or specific opcodes about transaction data. We want literally any arbitrary data out there, and we have to agree upon how correct it is and how to get it on chain. Okay, so right there, it's just you're opening up this massive space, and so it should sort of by definition take longer and be a little bit harder to get at. And that's kind of the oracle problem in general, is how do we all agree upon not just this specific thing that we have rules for in place in the code, but agree on this arbitrary piece of information. And that's what oracles are set up to do. That's why Tellor, for instance, like we limit it to a certain number of data points. So like we bring on price points, so ETH US dollar price, Bitcoin US dollar. And by limiting it to like these numerical factors and only these things that all the sort of data providers agree to support, then we can sort of quickly check whether or not it's valid, and they all know what it is. Because if you have a completely arbitrary system, anybody can say you ask any question and then people vote on it. That's like what Augur is. It's a prediction market, but then it takes, Augur can take a really long time to settle. And by making some design decisions, we've sort of been able to reduce how long it takes to settle and decide on things. But you still can't get really, really fast because it's just hard.
So what's the next big breakthrough point in Oracle technology, and what is the next big feature or the next big breakthrough that will take us from this current Oracle environment we're in right now to like the next one?
I think the biggest thing is so people are working more on oracles for multi-chains. Just the idea that, hey, this happened on Ethereum, now I can bridge that data over to Solana or Near or Cosmos or Polkadot. Like just being able to do that's an oracle that's passing data back and forth. Once those networks are in place, I think that's going to be really huge. Because once it's sort of at least semi-fast and easy to transfer data back and forth, now you can bridge tokens. Now you can launch your application over on some cheap chain and pass it back and forth. Same with like privacy features. Like you can have a state channel that passes things back and forth and mixes your coins, and you get a little bit of privacy in your Ethereum transactions. And once we have those things in place, I think that's going to be really the next leap forward. But same with like blockchains. Like I don't think in general, like everyone wants like the Visa scale transactions and things like that, but I don't think we need that. Like I think everyone wants to have this blazing fast high frequency DEX, and it's like, do we want that? Like is this the goal, that we sort of mimic the real world and now we have a DEX like that can compete? Like no, I mean it would be cool, I guess, from a technology perspective to build it, but ideally we should be building things that like, oh, now we have a money that's not controlled by a government, or now we have a way to host a website that nobody can take down. Those are cooler things, like not just building things that we already have in the real world on top of Ethereum. So
well, yeah, that's I mean that's something that, especially with DeFi, at least when looked in the summer, especially with the early on. I mean, we're slowly developing, but I mean, this whole technology, everything in this space, everything we're talking about here is like a baby. It's so new, and so even when we have our complaints for reviewers at home, even when we have these complaints, I mean, we're so early on that like what we've accomplished is already incredible. But yeah, that is a very valid criticism, because I do feel like a lot of the things we see in this space are just a mirrored version of what's available in the traditional markets. It's this is a decentralized product that is literally just the same as the regular traditional product, and the decentralization there isn't really helping that much. I mean, whatever, you could argue either way there, but I do hope as the technology matures, as we iron out the bugs in what we do have, that we're then able to even have the time or the money or the willpower to continue to innovate into new things that weren't possible before, and that's very exciting. Although we'll break a lot of things along the way, but that's what makes it fun. Now you mentioned this idea, and it's very close to your heart. I mean, because you brought up a couple of times this idea of being uncensorable, of being separate from the not controlled by the government, not controlled by the centralized powers. But you have a background. You came from the government world. You were an economist for the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and then you were a researcher for the CFTC. Did you hold these same ideals and values before you started working there, or after you were working there, you looked around, you're like, fuck this, and then you developed these kind of more libertarian ideals?
No, I'd actually say one of the best places to work if you have really strong political opinions is actually the government, because especially a lot of these agencies, like I know people think it's like, oh, they're always against your side. But they're relatively neutral. Like it's a whole bunch of people that just want to do their job and go home. So if you have really strong opinions, like nobody there cares. They're like, keep them to yourself. So it's, as long as you're like not sort of overtly political in what you're trying to do. Some of the people at the top, of course, they're political. They're like political appointees, but
yeah,
the day-to-day workers are generally, they could care less about any of that stuff. So it was actually a really good time, like I got to work on just a lot of really interesting projects. You have access to a lot of really interesting data, and so yeah, it was really good. But I did hold a lot of my opinions there, and I've developed them. But censorship resistance, I think that's kind of the key piece of the question there, and I think that's really been the use cases for all of this stuff. Like, what's been like, why does Bitcoin sort of do well? Originally it was, you have a way to sort of store money, and who's actually using Bitcoin for what it is, and it's people sort of getting around regulations for holding capital. So whether it's like people in China or moving around capital controls, like what was Ethereum's big use case? It was ICOs, it was tokens, it was getting around US securities laws that were sort of, they had gotten really restrictive. And so we all got around US securities laws, and now I think we're seeing financial arbitrage. So in the US, if you wanted to start a derivatives exchange, it's really, really, really expensive and can be hard. So people are just saying, screw that, we're just gonna launch it on Ethereum. And that's, so it still, I think, boils down to these regulatory arbitrage moments where it's not necessarily you're doing something that's illegal currently, but it's sort of, if you wanted to be a company in that space, it's going to be really, really hard and take you a long time to launch in a regulatory compliant way.
Well, I mean, it's good to hear that they're pretty politically neutral in these areas like the CFTC and these other government agencies that do make regulations, that do police this space. But in terms of their their knowledge, let's say this is like we said, it's a very new space, and there's crazy innovation. I mean, like in a span of 6 months or a year, it's like it jumps light years ahead from what it was in terms of what the technology is at, and in terms of the capabilities and the different financial products and tools available to the users. So do you feel like, at least from your experience on the inside, that, as a government worker, you were given the necessary knowledge and data, and you were up to date enough, and your finger was on the pulse of the space enough to be able to make accurate decisions, to make fair laws, fair regulations, and police appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some general arguments where, like, you could make the libertarian arguments that people should be able to do what they want with their money and bet with what they want on their money, and the government shouldn't regulate them and things like that. Well, like, those arguments aside, like, the SEC has plenty of knowledge to tell whether or not you're a security or not, or the CFTC, like, whether or not you fit into this definition. Because I think a lot of times, like, people are like, oh, the regulators are anti-crypto whenever they come down on EOS or come down on Ripple, and it's like, no, like, the law was, like, really straightforward, and you guys were just trying to get around it. It wasn't like a surprise or anything. Like, you don't need to be you guys are the ones trying to do these legal backbenders to get around it. It was sort of straightforward, and whether or not the laws should change, I think sometimes they should, because, like, I think a lot of times the laws were written in ways that sort of didn't anticipate crypto, and crypto doesn't really fit into the pegs. Because usually, like, from the SEC's perspective or the CFTC's perspective, they look at, okay, what is the law and does this fit in? And most of the time, like, it doesn't really have a perfect fit, but they usually have the right knowledge. It's just whether or not that bucket is what should be there. I think we need to, like, revisit as a space in general.
Yeah, I mean, like, the same way that that I have issues, and potentially you too, with us in the crypto space just mirroring products from the traditional world. So too, the regulators on that side, they're trying to shoehorn crypto products into the traditional financial laws. When they were writing the laws, were they thinking of a flash loan that's checking the Oracle, that's going to go to the DEX number, that's drawing from the LP, like. When they wrote those laws, I do not think that they envisioned or thought that they would ever have to cover these very, nowadays modern and advanced types of trading tools and other derivatives that are available to the market. So, I do hope that instead of just trying to shoehorn them, they do take a good look at it, regardless of whether they should have a say in it. They should take a look at it and adjust accordingly. There was, a big topic now is that FinCEN's a proposal to pretty much require kind of, KYC AML, but for taking from an exchange wallet over to a private wallet. What is your take on that?
Yeah, so I think this is going to be the big crypto killer in my mind. It's going to be the regulators making us KYC AML every trade or transaction we do. But like, people trying to argue the specifics of, oh, crypto is different, or it's not a money or something like that, like, those are bad arguments in my mind. Like, it's just, you're trying to not be part of it, but you are. Like, like, it is, can you launder money with crypto? At least the cryptos that we want to build, yes, of course you can. That's like half the reason we built this stuff, is to, so somebody could launder money and the government couldn't do anything about it. We need to have the discussions with regulators and things that, like, no, it's our money, we should be able to do with it what we want. It comes into place, like, fighting the Bank Secrecy Act, like fighting, whenever the right of them to sort of whatever track everything that you do. So whenever the Patriot Act came about, like, it's just kind of fighting for freedoms, and even, like, not left or right freedoms. It's just like, you need to fight for freedoms in general, and then they'll leave you alone. Like, it has nothing to do with crypto necessarily. Crypto fits in just like everything else does. They shouldn't be tracking what you're doing with your money regardless. So.
But you mentioned that this could be the crypto killer, but I mean, do you think anything could really kill it? Like, let's say, like you mentioned, from both angles, Bitcoin becomes so popular that all these institutions and banks and mainstreams are coming in. And on the other end, you have, the regulators enforcing KYC and AML on everything, all transactions. Wouldn't we just do the same thing we always do, and then just kind of make a new coin, a new technology that's separate from even this system, that's separate from even the crypto world, and then it'll just be this recurring cat and mouse game of just us going to our anarchy coin and them following us and onward and onward?
Hopefully, but like, a lot of people Like I think the Michael Saylors of the world and a lot of these institutions, they're fine with KYC AMLing everything. And a lot of the gains are going to be in Bitcoin, where it's going to be, owned by 100% people who are KYC AML'd. And it's just not really exciting. I think there will be sort of these smaller breakouts and people doing it, but like if you want to talk about killing crypto and things like that, like you can just be honest. Look at the people who are spending gas on Ethereum. These are known teams. Tellor's a known team. We're here in the US. All of these teams are kind of in the US or in Europe or something like that. Like, you send them a letter and you tell them you're going to jail or shut it down. And let's be honest, like the vast majority of these, they've become open source technologies that are rarely contributed to. So that would be what it would take to shut it down. When people are like, oh, well, you can't shut down a DEX. And it's like, well, look at Ether Delta. Like, what happened to that? Like, they shut it down. Like, of course, it wasn't like, maybe you could say like Uniswap killed it or something like that. But Uniswap would probably go the same route. And you're going to have to just keep, I think you're right. You're going to want to keep building these smaller and smaller coins. And that's where I actually think, we would need to go is not have any sort of centralizing point. So if we win, in my mind, it's not going to be because Ethereum has a $2 trillion, $100 trillion market cap. It's because like whatever 1,000 coins are all interoperable and they all have a $10 million market cap. Like that's sort of how you win, because then you can't really put a finger on it, and it's super easy to spin up and super easy to get around some of the regulation.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I know a lot of people in the space. I know that nothing will stop them, regardless of any regulation or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, essentially, this argument that government can't shut down these things, yeah, it's kind of iffy, because at the end of the day, they do control the on ramps and the off ramps, and as long as they're able to control the on ramps and the off ramps, they essentially have control of the network. They can't control what happens on the network, but listen, if no one's going to accept your Bitcoin, and you can't turn your Bitcoin into any fiat, to pay your electricity bill or whatever it may be, it's going to be a tough one. And that's why I think our savior will end up being Akon, who's building his crypto city somewhere in Africa. I'm telling you, no one saw it coming, but Akon will be the savior of the entire crypto world. I mean, it can even be China. I mean, that's the point, that America seemingly so far has taken a much more kind of stricter approach, or much more by the law approach to crypto. But we have to remember, there are many places in the world who have been much more open, much more lenient, and this is a global game.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm super bullish on crypto still, obviously. I mean, it's like, I'm not as bullish on the really big coins doing well. I think you're going to see just an explosion of smaller coins. But what I really hope happens is that we move beyond just the investing, so the coin goes up in value, and we start actually trading with it. We start, like Akon, building a city with it. We start actually buying and selling things, because I think too, that would take a lot of pressure off from the regulators. If Bitcoin was actually just used as a cash, like not for money laundering tools, not for investing and getting rich, if it was just used to buy pizzas and to get around paying credit card fees, like the government wouldn't care. Like, I don't think anybody would come after you. Same with, if Ethereum was just used for building art and building websites and doing things that wasn't this strictly financial thing, that then you sort of you're building something that matters, but then it's not sort of directly in the purview of regulators. Like, you're building derivatives and financial products. And that's actually one of the reasons that we were sort of drawn to the Oracle space, is you're building a technology, you're building something that can provide you utility, but it's not like, I'm regulated by my former boss or something like that.
And do you guys have your own token?
We do, yeah. So the Tellor Tribune.
And I'm assuming it's a utility token.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a pointless concept there at this point.
Yeah, it's semantics. That's what I'm mocking there. And what role does the token serve in the network?
So we actually have mining in our network. So we mint new tokens every time people compete to provide data points. So if you come on and request, say, the Bitcoin US dollar price, we have a network of data providers who go and grab the data points and compete to put it on chain, and then they get minted new rewards. And it's this minting of new rewards. So whenever you were asking for the price of Bitcoin, you would submit a tip to them, similar to like Bitcoin or Ethereum gas prices. You have to submit some gas in our token, and then the miners also get minted new tokens. And the real utility of tokens is it's just the network effects that they help create. Whenever you're able to use these inflationary rewards to bootstrap a network, to incentivize certain things and not other things, that's what's really powerful. I think a lot of people were really anti-token in like 2017, 2018, and I may have even been included in there. But when you see like some of these networks saying like, hey, I'm starting an exchange, so a Uniswap pool, and there's no liquidity on there because it's like a chicken and egg game, who comes on first, the traders or liquidity. And you're like, okay, well, if you provide liquidity, we'll mint this new token to you. And now all of a sudden, now you get a whole lot of liquidity, and you have something that's of value. Of course, it's just kind of temporary because you can only mint so many tokens. But it helps create something, and that's really the cool thing about these tokens is you didn't have something before, and now just we're all agreeing that this token can hold some value, and now something gets done and something is created of value.
Well, Nicholas, as we wind down this interview, I finish asking all my questions. This is your opportunity to shill whatever you want. Shill Tellor, shill Tellor's band, shill a coin, or shill your favorite TV show, whatever it is. Go, shill away.
Yeah, so I think I have to shill Tellor tributes. The coin, I think we're sort of the decentralized oracle. We're building a great community, so you can come check us out on Discord. Tellor.io is our website. We're launching actually our first new product here coming out at the end of the month. So we're going to be launching, it's our vertical product. So we're doing something besides just pure oracles, and we're calling it Chorus. And the idea is community currencies. So we're going to be allowing for a method for people to create their own coins, because as kind of I think I articulated in this talk, we believe that people should be able to create their own coins and actually be able to create their own monetary policies to utilize them for whatever they want. So come check us out, and looking forward to seeing this talk go live.
Awesome. Well, coins for everyone. Nicholas, thank you so much for speaking to us and giving us a little bit of your insights on both the ecosystem as well as your thoughts overall on the cryptosphere. So thank you very much for taking the time. And for all of our viewers here at Reimagine, I'm Yonah Hochhauser. Thanks for watching.